Let's discuss all of this now with social analyst Tessa Dooms, who joins us virtually from here in Johannesburg. Tessa, thank you so much for your time. Now, I don't know about you, but a few weeks ago when we started talking about this candidates list deadline looming, and of course there was the talk about the Constitutional Court bid to try and get the elections postponed, you really could have set your clock to the fact that we were going to have these protests and people unhappy with candidates lists and all of the accusations that we hear election in and election out. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, so the ANC has created a bit of a pattern in that lists and how they are constituted have become more opaque over time. And while the formal processes on paper and in its constitution seem to be very clear, it doesn't always equate with the list that you end up with. And I think that's what the Northwest are saying, is that in the past they've had a similar issue, and I'm sure this is not only for the Northwest province, where branches are not sure how the final list actually comes to be. And that's something that, as an internal organizational issue, the ANC needs to address. But of course, we'll find difficulty in addressing because it itself, in terms of, not having a permanent SG at the moment, its record keeping has been called into question. Its numeration, even of its membership, has been called into question. And so you have an ANC that really organizationally is not as strong as it needs to be. And so its processes are not necessarily working the way they always should.
But this, of course, also flies in the face of the narrative that the ANC's Electoral Committee has tried to put out there. It was just 2 weeks ago. I remember reading a piece, the ANC Electoral Committee chairperson, Kgalema Motlanthe, saying those things that you just mentioned, they're addressing that. And then there's a quote here where he says, the key task of the Electoral Committee is to ensure that the ANC deploys capable, credible and honest cadres who are trusted by the communities they serve as councillors and mayors after the forthcoming local government elections. So they knew that there would again be issues with how these lists are put together, and yet we're still sitting with this situation. How far do you think the ANC has come to try and get that message across, that what they're actually looking for are cadres who are capable, credible and honest?
I think the messaging is different from what the practice is. And so the messaging has been consistent from the ANC, saying that it is a organization of its branches, that its branches are the most important unit of the organization and make the decisions that go to the top. However, we have to take consideration of the fact that this is an organization that has a lot of issues, particularly in its leadership structures. We have factionalism that has been a concern for the organization for now over 10 years. You have concerns around whether the organization actually knows what's happening at branch level and can actually give a proper account for whether there are fake branches, which is something that is always part of the rumor mill within the ANC about people creating fake branches, people being able to manipulate even the branch system, so that even the names that come from the branches actually weren't legitimately from the branches. So the ways in which this needs to get dealt with are not going to be resolved in one sitting. And I think it's important that the ANC members do what the Northwest is doing and others are doing, where they're not only challenging the legitimacy of this, of their particular list, but they're really challenging the legitimacy of the entire process and alerting the ANC itself to the ways in which factionalism and continued corruption that goes unchecked is jeopardizing what their future chances are for success at the polls.
Now speaking of corruption, I mean, we're coming out of, I can't even remember how long the Zondo Commission has been on for. It feels like it's been forever, but it's really lifted the lid, along with investigative journalists who have lifted the lid on wide-scale corruption and state capture. But we also know that rot goes all the way to grassroots at municipal level. How much do you think all of that is going to hurt the ANC in these local government elections, whether or not they take place this year or at another time?
I think the narrative around corruption and the ANC's seeming inability to really do something decisive about corruption will have an effect on how the ANC fares. But I actually think what's being raised right now around the list and representation is one of the ways that they can solve for that. So it's about the credibility of the leaders that they put in communities, not only that those people are clean or credible right now, but the idea that communities have access to holding people to account, people that they choose, people who are from their communities and in their communities, would strengthen the ANC's case. The ANC's National Youth Task team have also brought up the issue around age and bringing in younger people onto the list by demanding 25% representation of youth on the list. All of those things around representation and around the idea that it is actually ANC members from below and communities that they represent, the constituents that they represent, that are vetting these lists and making sure the right people get on it. If the ANC gets that right, they do gain credibility, not because of their past, but because what they're setting up for the future in terms of the community's ability to have a say in the process.
Now, Jesse Duarte was reported saying that, look, they are preparing for local government elections to take place when it's supposed to this year, and that they're not too obsessed with what the courts eventually decide or what power they decide to give the IEC. Do you think it would benefit the ANC or negatively impact their chances of a good showing in the local government elections if these elections take place when they're supposed to in a couple of months' time?
Well, I think it depends on what political parties do with the time that they have. I do think that the ANC are probably in a better position than many political parties are to make sure that they make up for the time that would have been lost in being able to campaign on the ground because of lockdown restrictions. We've just come from a much harder lockdown than we probably would have expected at this point. And so the ANC, because it has traditionally had a strong ground game, will be ahead perhaps of other political parties. But I do think that more time may be useful for the ANC in its ability to rehabilitate its image, especially now off the back of the Zondo Commission coming to an end. You would hope that the ANC is able to show through this process that they are dealing quite decisively. But they have an opportunity, I think, if it is extended, to rehabilitate, at least at the grassroots level, their image and build trust in communities.
Okay, thank you so much. Social analyst Tessa Dooms, thanks so much, as always, for your time joining us live there from here in Johannesburg.